Ever feel like a consultant doesn't know what they're talking about when it comes to operations? You need someone that knows what you're dealing with. That's the experience that today's sponsor, the Breckham Group, brings to the table. Built by operators and engineers, they help you bridge the gap between strategy and execution inside your distribution center. Learn more about how their proven framework called Precision Supply Chain Operations can bring faster performance, greater efficiency, and real ROI at breckhamgroup.com. That's BRECHAM group.com.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Jason Morin, and he is the Senior Director of Continuous Improvement and Engineering at ID Logistics. And we're going to talk to Jason a little bit about design. We're going to learn a little bit more about ID Logistics, and we're going to talk about user experience too, which I love to talk about, by the way, and I know he does too, and a little bit about continuous improvement. And it's been about 4 years, maybe 5 years, since Jason has been on the podcast at the pandemic era Modex. We had him on. We were just reminiscing about. So it's great to get him back on here and tap into some of his knowledge today. So Jason, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Hey, I'm great. It's great to be back on.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to get you on, and always happy to get some of your insights and your thinking on the industry itself, and particularly on certain process sets and things like that. So happy to do that today. So for people maybe that are not familiar, tell us a little bit about ID Logistics and what it is you all do.
ID Logistics is a 3PL, a global 3PL. We're in about 18 countries, the US, Latin America, a very strong presence throughout Europe. Specialized in multiple verticals: e-com, FMCG, food and beverage, fashion apparel, healthcare, high tech, etc. About 18 million square feet, classic warehousing, D2C fulfillment, co-packaging, and various other value-add services. So, and some transportation. So,
all right, very nice.
We run the gamut.
Yeah. So decent amount of space you got there to work with and do some projects from the continuous improvement side. I imagine, right? So why don't you tell us a little bit about that, like your role, like what do you focus on in the continuous improvement and engineering side?
Currently, we're deploying an internal labor management system, which is pretty exciting, in-house developed system that we're deploying globally. I've also been involved in various CI initiatives, exploring new technologies. Innovation is very important to ID Logistics. That includes AI. We have a global AI initiative throughout the organization to really understand what it is, what it can do for us. And I know you've talked a lot about AI, but yeah, it's a really exciting time. Almost, as we were talking, a little overwhelming. Right. There's so much out there. It's changing so fast, but it's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's very interesting to see, like you said, it's overwhelming, right? I mean, I think we talk a lot about, the overwhelming amount of like physical solutions that we see, like a ProMat or a Modex, but now from like a software AI perspective, I think it's also getting overwhelming because there's just so many solutions that are coming out and they're tacking on AI or they're using AI. So I'm curious from your perspective. I mean, when you say like you have this global initiative to look at AI and figure out how you can utilize it and where it adds value for your company, are you looking at it from the perspective of like external solutions or what you can kind of develop internally from your own team?
I think it's both. We have an internal team that's driving this out of France. working with various countries to see what we can develop internally, but also looking at external solutions as well. As an engineer, it's really exciting because, engineers and data analysts, we analyze a lot of data, right? We do a lot of work, even if we have like a slotting tool. And now with AI, you start to think about what can AI do for you in terms of, can it arrive with a ultimate slotting solution? No, it doesn't have all the knowledge that maybe you have, but you can feed it information and it can take a lot of the legwork out. And I've had some success. I think we all experiment with Chat GPT and Copilot, and I've had some success in which it can do a few things for me that has saved me time, right? It doesn't deliver a final solution because it doesn't know everything I know. And prompting is, I think, an art form, which I'm still trying to get better at.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't mean the system doesn't know, the AI doesn't know how to do it. You just have to know how to talk to it in the right way. But yeah, just from an engineering perspective and analysis, it's exciting. It's moving so fast. And I think the only way I'm keeping up is just by experimenting with it when I can in my job.
Yeah, interesting. And it's interesting you said that you kind of have to know how to talk to it, which is very similar to a human as well. You could say, right? You need to know how to talk to a human to get them to do what you want them to do, right? Effectively as well. So,
right.
You mentioned that it's a little overwhelming. We talked about there in terms of the amount of solutions. So when you look at these new solutions, whether it's AI or any other type of solution you might look at, how do you kind of approach it and how do you weed through it to see if it's like actually a viable solution and one that's going to be effective for your operations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the best thing to do is first make sure you are very intimate with the problems within your organization. What's happening on the warehouse floor? What's happening in the warehouse office? I think you have to have a deep understanding and almost have some experience in feeling pain with certain processes or other things before you start looking for solutions, right? And that's why I train new engineers, right? Let's not look at solutions and then try and find the problem. Understand the problems, and then that will help you lead to the right solution. Sometimes we start looking at solutions without having a full understanding of what the problem is. And you may realize when you dig in the problem, hey, we don't need a fancy technology solution. We don't need AI. We just need a better process, right? So that's usually the first step, and that helps me. And if I'm evaluating a solution and it makes me think about a process and I don't know the answers, that means that myself or maybe the team, we're not as familiar with the gaps in the process and the challenges we're having. We know at a high level, but we're not in the weeds. And I think that's really, really important, is to be in the weeds and understand what's happening with a problem before you do the fun part, which is looking for exciting solutions. That's the fun part. The challenging part is sometimes rolling up your sleeves and getting on that warehouse floor and sweating and spending time with the operation to understand what's truly going on.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point, because it is kind of, you hear maybe, and I guess I'm curious to learn this too. I mean, how do you first understand that there's a gap somewhere or a problem? Like, how does that kind of get to you or get to your team to start exploring a solution?
Typically, you should have a standard for anything. A standard meaning there should be a defined way, whether it's right or wrong, there should always be a defined process. And whether it's defined through, say, a written SOP on paper, defined through a workflow in a system. When you see and I'm a lean guy, we say a deviation from standard. When you see or encounter a deviation from standard, that's a flag, right? That's, something is happening that shouldn't happen. And that's what should trigger an investigation. I'm a believer in observation, just spending time observing work, how humans work, how they interact with systems. If you're in warehousing long enough, you kind of see some of the same challenges, right? When you see someone staring at a screen, you're at a computer screen or an RF screen for a very long time and pressing lots of buttons and they're still sitting there, something's up, right? They've encountered a situation they weren't expecting, or there's something going on. But yeah, that's the best way I know, is just starting with very simple observation and getting the truth of what's happening on the floor. And that's where you will see deviations from standard.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's such a good call out too on, you see somebody where they seem like they're spending longer on a step than they should take. Right. And that should be a trigger to maybe ask that question, right? Like, oh, is everything okay? Or you're getting hung up on something. Or it just seems like, oh wow, they're taking like way too many steps to do this, and I think that leads you to some of those potential areas where you can create those solutions. So now you mentioned kind of the interaction there with the computer or the RF screen or whatever the solution may be. So talk to us a little bit about, from a user experience standpoint, right? How do you look at some of these solutions now, and how do you evaluate like the actual experience the user on the floor is going to have when they interact with these systems or solutions?
Yeah, it's a really important question to ask, again, through observation. I love to see how warehouse workers interact with systems, whether it's RF gun, they're at a pack station, with a desktop, whatever it may be. I think this also comes out in UAT, right? User acceptance testing, where we're testing workflows. I think what happens, again, in my experience, is with a WMS or similar system, a lot of focus is spent on things like allocation strategies. How do you distribute the work? How do you waive the work, et cetera? And those are all extremely important. But when it comes to the execution side, now you're relying on humans to carry out the goals, right? To load the trucks, to pick the orders. And this is where the user experience, to me, is very important, because we want to present the information to the employees so they are successful, right? And I think you see great UX design in like web pages and apps, right?
Right.
And I think, you can see the difference between a well-designed web page that just naturally flows, right? Versus kind of a clunky web page or web app where you're kind of confused, right? Did I press this button? Did this information go through? I think it's the same thing for industrial systems, where sometimes UX design is almost an afterthought, right? Where we do all this work, we do all this configuration and design, and then we put the life of the DC into the hands of a worker on the floor who probably has received minimal training, right? And expect them to get things right every single time. And one of the best ways to do that is to have a positive UX experience for that person, where the work flows seamlessly and helps guide them through the work. I'm just a big believer in that. In fact, I think my first experience 25 years ago with a green screen, homegrown WMS for 3PL, it was written by software engineers, but you could tell it was designed by warehouse operators, in that the screens just flowed naturally. They were simple, they were intuitive, used action verbs, right? Go to location A1.
Yeah.
Scan this, right? Ask simple questions. Did you do X? Yes or no? I'm a big fan of those very simple designs, because I think it just helps people get the work done. And it's also less frustrating, right? We want people to come to the job and not be frustrated. Just like when I sit down on my laptop, the last thing I want to do is interface with some software that's just clunky and not intuitive. And you just struggle.
And I think that's such a great point when you think about, like you said, interacting with like your phone, right? Or your computer, like on a personal level, like, or like outside of work, right? It's like kind of, if you download an app on your phone and you go into it and it's like difficult to figure out how to use it, you're probably putting it to the side, right? And you're probably going to get a different app that does the same thing, or you're just going to forget about that app, right? Where as like in the work setting, right? If that's the case with the system you're using, you don't really have that option, right? To set it aside. You're probably just going to end up getting frustrated, right? And have a productivity slow down, or just not be as efficient as possible. So I think it's a really great point there. So I'm wondering, do you have any kind of like examples where you've looked at the user experience and then improved it, or one that was like a really good example, and what were kind of like the results of that?
Some examples from past lives. We ask, for example, a picker to pick an order, and they go to a location and they do several things. One of the things that's really important is when they hit enter or they scan, the focus, right, the cursor, whatever, moves to the next logical field. I've seen examples where it wasn't designed that way or something changed where, say, I scan a label and I have to pick something out of that carton that has that label. And the next step is to confirm the quantity. And I go to my RF screen, but the focus is not on the quantity. It's somewhere else where I have to like hit enter on the quantity, but I'm in a different field. I've seen this a lot. And so what you end up seeing a lot of is even if I'm watching someone from afar, when I see a lot of tapping on a screen, on a keyboard, or even a touch screen, something's amiss, right? Like, and then you ask the operator, like, oh yeah, the cursor, the focus jumps to here. We have to remember to hit backspace or go back a couple fields, hit enter or something like that. I've also seen this with barcodes where you have to scan a barcode, not to confirm, but you're introducing, say, like a serial number, right? So if you're picking and you're confirming what serial number you're picking for, say, a part, and the design is it will accept anything. This becomes an issue when you may have multiple barcodes within your vicinity. I can't tell you how many, like when you see a carton or a pallet move through a supply chain, there's all these labels and barcodes, like carriers, manufacturing barcodes, 3PLs. We love to put our own barcodes to track inventory. So it could be that they scan the wrong barcode. I've seen that. Or if we put a pallet ID on a pallet, 3PLs, we'll put our own tracking IDs and labels on goods that come into our warehouses. And we're creating that pallet ID. We print a label or barcode, put it on there and scan it. And that's what initiates it. But again, I may accidentally scan a barcode on the carton and the system takes it. To me, good design would be, hey, how do we ensure that we scan the right barcode? We know we capture serial numbers for this client, and all serial numbers begin with XY. If the operator scans a barcode, let's do a quick check in the system to make sure it starts with XY. If it doesn't, throw up an error, right? Build those, you call them quality checks throughout the process to ensure people are doing the right thing. And I prefer the term, not dummy proof, but human proof, because you could put the CEO of your organization through your warehouse training, get them on the floor and picking orders, and eventually they're going to make a mistake, right? Does that mean they're dumb? No, it just means they're human, right? It just means they're human, and they've done something where they were trained, they pay attention, but they've encountered a situation where it's easy to make a mistake. And again, I think that all goes back to UX design that guides people through the process, builds some quality checks, which systems are great for quality checks, right? Is this individual making the right scans, doing the right things? If not, throw up a red flag and stop the process.
Yeah, interesting. And I've lived through that example with the serial numbers before as well.
Have you?
And it was such a nuanced issue because we only had, I think it was like 2 products out of thousands of products that had serial numbers that need to be tracked, and sure enough, either we would run into an issue where the serial number somehow would have already been eaten up in the system, right? So it would throw an error saying like, oh, well, the serial number has already been shipped, right? Or is it no longer in circulation? And even though that's what's on the box, right? And it's still in our inventory, or the same thing, right? Somebody scans like the regular SKU number as the serial number, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, well, the only way to fix it is IT has to go in and erase it and redo the record and all these things. It's a big headache, right? So I mean, I've definitely felt that pain, and I think it's an interesting thing. It's like it seems simple, right? Like tell the person, oh, just scan the right barcode, right? But when people are moving fast and they're going from products that maybe have serial numbers to products that don't have serial numbers, and it gets a little confusing. So how do you kind of like put that that control in place, right? To be able to do that.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Are you asking the question, where's my stuff, too often? Whether it's in your own warehouses, from your suppliers, or in your customer network, if you're not sure where your stuff is, then Surge Air has the solution for you. With Surge Air's 99.9% accuracy, you're getting more than just supply chain visibility. You're getting the ability to orchestrate your supply chain and guide decisions in real time. Reduce the chaos in your supply chain and find operational truth with Surge Air. Find your visibility and learn more at surgeair.com. That's surgeair.com.
Yeah, you make a good point. People are working at a certain pace because we often have expectations for them, right? You need to pick so many units per hour. And when you have that time pressure, they will sometimes tend to make mistakes. And so again, more reason to have a good UX design that helps them. I almost consider like driving down the road. Like when you drive down the road, you have traffic lights, you have road signs, but they're simple, right? There's certain shapes, there's certain colors. You have a word or two, but you're driving so fast. But those road signs or traffic lights give you information that you need and that you can process pretty quickly. That's why visuals are so important, right? Back in the day, I don't even know what they call it anymore, pick to display, right? In fact, if you tour an Amazon site, they've reopened, by the way, you can tour Amazon warehouses. They opened this up 10 years ago and they just reopened it. So I toured a site, Amazon, and we're watching them pick. And sure enough, every item they pick, there's a picture of that item.
Right.
To help them make sure they're picking the right item, because they will mix SKUs right in a bin. And there's information presented, but there's always the photo. They always have a photo. If they don't have a photo, it triggers an action for someone to go take a photo of an item that's not in the system to help the individual. It's kind of a backup to make sure, am I picking the right item? They do a scan verification, but they always have the photo of the item right there, which is fabulous.
Yeah. I think that extra reinforcement goes a long way, right? I mean, it's kind of similar concept when you do like a pick to light or something, right? Like maybe your scanner is telling you where to put it, but that light is also telling you where to put it, and giving you another visual indicator to be able to do that. So great points there. And I'm curious now, as you look at more technology and especially on the AI front as well, how do you look at it in terms of balancing the technology with still the human aspect of the operation? Like, how do you look at the balance between the two and maybe even like the intersection of the two as well?
I view new technologies, especially AI, as something to help us perform better. Now, are there material handling technologies that physically move like a tote from point A to point B, like a pallet ASRS? Yes. For environments that are a little more manual, where you have person to goods who are using RF guns, or like you mentioned, pick to light, I think technologies just make us better at doing our jobs. Whether it's doing a UX design, pick to light, why does pick to light work so well? I mean, that's a technology that's been around for, my gosh, I don't know, 25 years, 30 years. Yeah. Why does it work so well? It's visual, right? Human beings are visual creatures. And I think the stat that gets quoted all the time is the human mind can process an image 60,000 times faster than a word, right? Or a sentence. Wow. That's right. So it's extremely fast, but that's why, in fact, we have a large customer here in the US, actually global, that are fans of pick to light, and it works extremely well. You have the lights that light up, they tell you the quantity to pick, and they move very, very fast. They're not looking at a screen. There's no extra information on the screen. But yeah, I think technology, there's some definitely proven technologies. Again, they're a little bit older, but when pick to light came out, even voice is a mature technology. They make us perform better as humans. If you're still relying on this person to goods and expecting the human to ultimately execute what you need them to do on the floor, which is pick the order, unload the truck, etc.
I think it's interesting to see kind of the different takes on that, right? And like how the technology will interact with the human worker itself, and how it will be collaborative or augmenting or powering the human to do more. So I'm curious from your perspective, and this probably ties into the design and user experience perspective as we look at kind of the next generation coming into the workforce, right? How do you look at, leveraging technology to be able to attract that worker to want to work in these operations, and then I guess, also retain them and keep them as well?
This younger generation or generations, they've been using iPhones since they were kids.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, I'm Gen X, but I think they have a higher expectation that the software they use is built around them. It's more intuitive, it's interactive, right? Because they're used to having like an app store. You go to App Store and you can download 10 different apps that do the same thing. Well, which one are you going to choose? You're going to choose the one that meets your needs. I'm sure many of them will come to the workforce and start using some of these industrial systems and interfaces and realize like, wow, this is not what I'm used to. I think it'll be more of a challenge, but I also think you can train anyone to do anything. I remember training an individual years ago that I don't think ever touched a keyboard. And now we had hired this individual to be a forklift operator. They had an RF gun, they had a screen. And after a few months, this person was rocking and rolling. But I think with this newer generation, they've already got some skills in interfacing, but I think they're going to have higher expectations.
Yeah.
So in my mind, if you don't focus on UX design with industrial systems, with warehouse management systems and the like, in the same way that companies do with web pages or apps, it's going to be frustrating, right? I think for those users, I could see one day where you're looking at a screen and you're in the warehouse and you need help, and maybe you have a chat bot, right? Not that I'm a fan of chat bots. Some are useful, some are not, or some are helpful, some are not. But maybe one day we'll have chat bots if we're stuck in a situation on the floor and we're trying to pick an order.
Just ask it right in that spot. Yeah. I think it's a good idea. Actually, not a bad idea.
Yeah, right. Hey, I've encountered X.
Yeah.
What do I do? And that's a big thing. We expect people sometimes to work miracles, right? We often, as managers or engineers, Monday morning quarterback when an error happened on the floor and go like, oh, they should have known. Well, sometimes even with great UX design, you can't anticipate every situation, and you never should. But sometimes we expect people to work miracles, right? And so that's also why I'm a big fan as part of UX design and just general design with warehouse management systems is what I call system directed versus user directed. Have the system guide the individual through the process, and it puts the onus on the IT group and the engineering group and operations to design a good system that's easy to operate, rather than pushing the responsibility more to the individual to have to figure things out, especially if they counter a situation where they don't know what to do. And I'm also a big fan of choices are made on the floor, and the best way to get a human who's working in the warehouse to make the right choice is not to give them a choice. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Design it well, guide them through there, and I think the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah, I agree. And I said, when I worked in operations, we would be like, well, we don't want them to think, really, right? Like if they have to stop and think, as you said, like, and they have to make a choice, right? That's when, they start to make the wrong choice, right? And then you run into that situation where you have a problem and, somebody's not close by to answer their question, and they don't want to go track somebody down to ask that question. I think, the more you can just, alleviate those situations, and as you said, like, not get them to a point where they have to make a choice, then I think like the more effective and efficient they'll be throughout the workflows and the processes there. Yeah.
That's exactly right. If you go back to the driving analogy, are you really thinking when you're driving? No, you're kind of usually I'm on my phone or I'm listening to a podcast like this one. Right.
Yeah.
But the roads, the signs, they're designed to help you make quick decisions and to kind of react and to guide you. Right. take the same approach with UX design for warehouse management systems or HMI for, say, an automated system. I think it will pay dividends. It's hard to measure, but in the long run, it will serve you well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And really great insights from you here, Jason, and really appreciate you coming on and talking to us. Always a pleasure to hear some of your perspectives and get your knowledge on some processes and process improvement in the warehouse, and really appreciate the time today. If people want to learn more about ID logistics or maybe pick your brain a little bit more, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, sure. You can find me on LinkedIn, Jason Morin, Morin. You can Google ID Logistics and find us online, or you can email me at jmorin@id-logistics.com.
All right, fantastic. And we'll definitely put that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well as in the show notes here. So, Jason, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.